Hi, my name is Michelle Krupa, and this is the lesson video for the CALLA lesson, or the CALLA lesson. And so I'm going to begin by talking about how I introduced this lesson, and basically how we started was we talked about what is expected of them for this lesson. So on the board I have the content objectives, and they were to analyze how the Turks capture Constantinople and how it affected European trade. And then we talked about how we're going to analyze Portugal's role in discovering a new route to Asia. And then we talked about how we're going to explore the expeditions of Bartolomeu Diaz and Vasco da Gama. So you can't see it right now, but there's a couple things on the other side of the room that are up all the time. One of those is like our typical daily objectives. And so I have one for social studies, and it typically focuses just on like the main objective that the students are going to be just, researching, analyzing, interpreting, and identifying information regarding exploration. And then I also have another poster up on the other side of the wall that talks about Bloom's taxonomy and how the fourth level in is analyzing, and that the kids are going to examine or explain or categorize or investigate based on this word analyze, so they know what that means. What are they actually doing while they're learning this lesson? So on top of that, we have our language objectives, and so the students are asked to brainstorm about note-taking. That's the first thing we're going to do after we do the building background and the vocabulary. We go into our first activity, which is the note-taking. So the discussion there is one of my language objectives. The second is analyzing the effects of the following. Closing of the Silk Route, which talks about the Turks and Constantinople and European trade. And we also talked about, for this lesson, Portugal's role in exploration, which kind of brings up Vasco da Gama and Bartolomeu Diaz. So for learning strategies, we've got that they're going to focus on note-taking, which I'm going to create an anchor chart, and that's what I did as a class. After we do the anticipation. So and then the other activity is for our other learning strategy was to analyze information that is being provided based off of the PowerPoint or the videos that they would see after this. So just really quick, the materials that I use for this activity to begin with are their Hardcore Horizon Social Studies book, which is nice and thick, and I've talked a ton about how this book is actually super complex. It's actually written for like an 8th grade freshman year level for text complexity, so it's pretty hard for the kids to work with, especially my EL kids. They're going to be using anchor chart paper. They're going to have their social studies spiral notebook to learn how to take notes in, and also to copy down the anchor chart. I'm going to have a PowerPoint, and then I will have a whiteboard that I will distribute to the kids for a Think, Pair, Share as well. So before we begin anything, we talk about the fact that last time we had a lesson, we talked about the continents and how each continent traded and imported and exported goods, and how that whole system worked out. So it's kind of a recall of information. We went back to the lesson one, and I said, pull out some information that you've learned from this last lesson, or maybe raise your hand if you already remember something from last lesson that you can tell us, so that we access that prior knowledge, and so we're kind of like at where we need to be. So after that's done, then I review what we're going to be talking about today for vocabulary. So I'll say, all right, well, we've got the word prophet, navigation, we've got cartographer, caravel, and expedition. Now, prior to this lesson and lesson one and the whole unit in general, the kids got a sheet and were able to find the vocabulary, the definition of the vocabulary words before we even began. And we kind of had a discussion about the vocabulary in the way beginning and did a couple activities to see what they knew about the vocabulary, what's something new that they're going to learn based on the vocabulary. So this is just kind of a reminder of this is what we're going to be talking about. And this is really helpful to highlight these words because when we're talking about how to note take, it's going to be really important that the kids look for these key words that we're talking about for this lesson. So after we've gone through the vocabulary and I have talked about pretty much what we're going to be doing first, then I have them take out the spiral notebook and I tell them we're going to do an anchor chart. And this is how I always do anchor charts. I give them the opportunity to move up. You know, this isn't really big. It's not projected like it is for a PowerPoint lesson. So typically I'll say, all right, kids, we're doing an anchor chart. You're going to want to pull out your spiral notebook. Make sure you find a spot in the room that you're going to be successful. So a lot of the kids will move up here in the area right by my cart, or some kids will move over to this table or to this table, and some kids will stay at their seat. So it just gives them an opportunity to move around and to get themselves comfortable before we start the lesson. So then I tell them, okay, so we're gonna start with learning how to take some notes. And I tell them that it's purposeful and meaningful because as they get older, true life, teachers are not gonna take the time to break down the information the same way. You're gonna have to take those notes and kind of analyze that information on your own as you get older. So it was really important that the kids know how to do this. So I titled it Note Taking Tips. Okay, and then we started to brainstorm. I said, so I'm going to begin by giving you some ideas of how to take notes, and then if somebody here has an idea of what else we can do, raise your hand and we'll put it on the anchor chart. So I said, okay, so the first thing is when you're taking notes, you're going to want to make sure that you either bullet or number your information. Okay, so, and then, just in case there's that one kid that doesn't know what bullet means, I would say, okay, so that's a bullet right there. So then you're just, making little bullets throughout of information, not so much in paragraph form, so it's easier to read. And on top of that, so I'll piggyback and say, okay, so it's easier to read. Do we really need to make complete sentences? This is like the only excuse you have for not to make the complete sentences with your notes, because you don't have enough time to make complete sentences. So you might say, do not need complete sentences. And I hate to break it to you guys, but for me, and I don't know if you can see them over here, but my anchor charts are not as super fancy and Pinteresty as you'll see online, but they get the point through and the kids take the notes. And every time I do an anchor chart, I do it for the first time. So I don't create this and then leave it for next year. This gets thrown out at the end of the year and I start a new one every year, so that I'm doing it with the kids, because sometimes it changes. Not every time is it the same, okay? So then I will say, so what's important here? What do you need to know when you're learning something? What are the important facts that we need to write down? Do we need to write down every last important thing? What are some things that you think would be beneficial to have in our notes? Okay, so this is where the kids chime in. They'll say, oh, well, maybe we need to know vocabulary. Okay, so you're gonna write down vocabulary. And I'll say, good, vocab, what else? And somebody else raised their hand, they said, how about dates? Well, of course, we're talking about history. Dates are really important. You're gonna wanna know when things happen. Then they'll say, what about people? Okay, yep, just like the fact that we're talking about Bartolome Diaz or Vasco da Gama today. You're gonna wanna know about those people. So you're gonna say people. Places, okay? All these things were coming up. And I tell you, when they get on a roll with an anchor chart and we're talking about notes and everything like that, it's quick, it's fast, and they have so many ideas. So we went through vocabulary, dates, people, places, big events, especially if you're talking about, now it wouldn't really relate to